I'm just busy coordinating camps and registrations and like in an email circus. So my kids are like the first day I went to the rink, they all cried. I was going for 2 hours. We don't want you to go. I've been here for 16 months, guys. Like sprinting out the door. So it's been really fun. It's so great to see the joy on the players' faces. And of course, we shouldn't be, nor I am also not doing anything terribly complicated, right? Because many of them haven't actually skated since November. So, it's kind of been fun to go back to basics and just see the pure joy of it. And there's no stress about any of it right now. Like everyone's just happy to be there. Less of the bullshit, as they like to say. So it's been good. And actually a cool part is I did all these online sessions, as you guys know, throughout the season. And within my association, they skewed quite young. So I mostly had like U11, U9 players joining in for these workouts, which is really cool. But now my camps are filling up so quickly for those age groups. Normally on the ice, I don't run those age groups, or I have 4 or 5 kids. Now those are my super full camp. So I guess it bodes well for my daughters that I'm getting more experience with the younger whippersnappers. But yeah, it's been fun. It's nice to get back to it. And I'll just do this week here and then have another break till the end of July. So yeah, it all seems fairly back to normal, to be quite honest with you, which is strange.
We're depending on you, Kim. I just I had a Skype with Jim, Jim Plumer at Vermont, and Harry and Peter Smith on Monday. And Jim was just back from his first recruiting trip in 18 months. He went out to Minnesota and watched there was U12s, U14s, U16s, and he was blown away by the talent level of all the kids coming out of especially the American Southwest, like California, Arizona, but just generally. And I've never really heard him talk in such terms before, but he couldn't believe like the skill level, skating level of so many kids, not just 1 or 2. I think he's mainly thinking U12s and U14. So get to work.
Well, it's funny. I'm even watching these kids, and I mean, there are some that are ahead of the curve, and at the young age groups, it's because of their skating. And we're doing such a disservice to these players. And again, this is not an age group I've spent a lot of time with. But clearly in their team practices or their skill camps they've been doing, the skating and the edge work and all that has not been emphasized at all. Because we all know if you spend a week or 2 or consistently weekly with U9s and U11s, edge work and stride, like they're going to pick it up. Like they're sponges, but a lot of these kids are already, unfortunately at U11, kind of behind the 8 ball. We did outside edges yesterday and some of them looked at me like I was a crazy person. I'm thinking, how do you not know how to use at least the basics of this, right? So I do feel like, there has to be a lot more skill work at the younger age groups and more of a buy-in from parents to do that. And it doesn't always have to be playing a game. And I think in Toronto, we're still way too focused on how many games are the kids playing, how many tournaments are they in versus what skill work they're doing. So between that, edges and shooting, my goodness, the shooting, Tim. Wow. So like they're just not taught anything. It's actually shocking how little they know.
This is shocking.
Yeah.
This is very shocking.
Well, I think, Joni, and again, this is not an age group I've spent a lot of time with, but it seems with boys, they go to hockey camps earlier. They're more committed earlier because it gets a little crazier younger, typically for the boys. Mm-hmm. And so the girls don't take up the sport quite as early. And when they do, often their introduction to it is in more of a house league format and it's sort of like a slower onboarding. Whereas the boys, it's like once you're like, I'm a hockey player, it like hits you in the face. Yeah. If that's what you really want to do. And so I think with the slow onboarding, we haven't really empowered those coaches to teach skill. And the parents are less likely to send their daughters to a skills camp, especially at that age group. They'd rather be with the girls. So basically I'm going to be opening up a whole new market because my daughters are young of teaching pure skill to younger players. And I just don't think it's being done. They kind of go right into house league, right into scrimmaging, and not really emphasize the fundamentals. So, but the shooting is, part of it's repetition and part of it's just a complete lack of instruction on it. So they're getting really bad repetition, even if they are practicing it. And Tim and Wally would both know, like when you have a girl who can shoot, like it still makes you stand out. It's still, I think, a separator. I think at the Olympic level, of course, all of them can shoot. But it still is something that makes you stand up and go, whoa, with the girls at younger levels. So, yeah, these are the things I'll try to fix, Tim. So I'll try to keep up with the Americans, but I think it's going to take more than just my effort to make that happen.
Yeah, it sounds like it doesn't bode well for us down the road if in the largest hockey market in Canada where the reports are not great. I probably would agree with you on that's probably true that maybe generally speaking the girls sort of come to it just a bit later than the guys, like the passion for it or whatever. I think undoubtedly a factor as well is, like we talked about before, when the young guys sort of get interested, they watch everything. They watch all the NHL. They do, and we all know there's a big visual element to learning, and I'm guessing that a lot of the females miss out on that visual element for the ones that would benefit from it, because they tend not to, and it's a generality, of course, but they tend not to watch as much hockey or high-level hockey, so they're missing out on that visual learning element, which for me, when I was growing up, whether it was tennis or hockey stuff, whatever, tennis and golf are probably two better examples for me. I learned so much by watching the best players play tennis, like how to control or hit your backhand, or all those little elements. So the visual learning piece is huge, and lots of kids perhaps missing out on it.
Well, that's one of the reasons that I'm creating this this library of female only clips, right? So I'm gonna obviously clip a lot out from the world championship, and I've got a ton now from PWHPA and NWHL and even some NCAA U Sports. So I do think I agree. I don't know that they're going to necessarily sit down and digest the whole NHL game or the whole scope of what's on Sports Center, but I do think they love to know why. And so when I share little clips with them and really break it down, the girls love that. And it's even less, it doesn't even need to be like what we would consider a typical highlight. They love even just the most basic clips. When you break it down for them, explain to them, they really seem to enjoy that. So yeah, here's hoping that, I know I'll be using a lot of that with our association to get the I guess well, female only, because I think it's just not, I think why not? I've got this great clip I showed to my campers yesterday of Sarah Nurse doing linear crossovers entering the zone in the PWHPA game. Like, why show Connor McDavid doing it? Like,
why not?
Well, but why? They can watch Connor every night. They can watch Connor every night.
No, they don't see him every night. That's part of the point. They don't watch him. But I would agree with you. Like, I mean, my main point is, if you see, like, I just saw a great little skill the other night, Pietrangelo taking a D-to-D pass and sort of passing to himself. And like, if you find a clip like that, that's good and useful, use it until you can maybe find a female clip that's the same, and then fine, But yeah. So I just think it's limiting to just be focused on the female only. It's kind of the reverse discrimination kind of thing.
Well, but to be honest, Tim, I mean, my business is Total Female Hockey for a reason. And honestly, I'm the only one, or one of the few, who runs girls only in Toronto, of all places, where we have so many girls. It's ridiculous. And still, most people are doing, they just have sort of a general hockey camp. I'm not saying it's the right way, but it's shocking. it's amazing to me how many parents, families, girls are like, oh my God, it's all girls, and you have all female instructors, and the amount of excitement and buy-in there is as a result of that, I think has been really powerful for me, and big reason of what I do with my company. So and some of it for me is if it's total female hockey, I should probably be showing clips from female hockey, right? It's sort of brand, it's pretty accurate when it comes to the branding of it. But yeah, I agree with you. There is definitely some stuff on the guys' side that I haven't been able to replicate yet on the female. But I also think it's, there's just not that much access to that type of stuff right now. So I think if people could have female only, I think the coaches and the players so far have really loved it. And they've actually said that to me explicitly. If I show a clip of my junior team doing a skill, they remember it. They remember the girl's name who I said did the thing. They have a more of an uptake. It seems to resonate with them a little bit more. So yeah, we'll see. But it's still definitely a work in progress.
Have you seen that kid that does all those tricks with the puck? He even shoots a slap shot. He shoots an apple off his friend's head.
Oh,
Yeah.
Holy
Yeah.
jeez. It's unbelievable.
I think he's an Ontario guy. If I'm not mistaken.
Is he a
Can he
native
play?
kid? It looks like, I think he's a native kid. He's incredible though.
Can he play the game though? That's the big question.
Can he skate?
Can he think?
Oh, I don't know. I apparently played college and got hurt his first game or something.
Wally,
I don't know why he wouldn't be able to play the game, because he skates really well, and because he does some stuff skating.
think
His
back.
skills are off the chart.
Think back to those Koreans, Tom. They could all skate and handle a puck and shoot, but they had no friggin' clue how to play the game.
Yeah, but I think it was a little bit like you were talking about watching it. And that, this kid, like you remember Bobby Shrimp, I think, or something, that had all the skills, but he didn't do that well. And or the guy that goes around the world teaching stick handling, Sean Skinner. is it?
Skinner.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
what he does well anyway. I don't know that much about the other stuff, but
yeah.
I sure wouldn't want to be the one sitting there with an apple on my head, I'll tell you.
Wally wants
I
to
wonder
win.
how many friends he
I
went
think-
through before it worked.
Wally.
Yeah, I'm glad Dominic got back on because he's been down in the States, and Dominic, you may not appreciate how far ahead you are down there, but I've had a number of people tell me how far advanced the United States is in terms of development of its players.
Oh.
And in terms of scouting and looking for agents, the development there has been extremely good. Like we are behind. There's no doubt about it. Dom, I'm just, I
Wow.
typed in that the number of times you've been on the ice, and Kim's just started, but the number of times you were on the ice last year before the start of the season and before that, I think is an indication of they're getting more ice time, in your case, better instruction, just as if Kim was instructing. And I think in the States, that model of entrepreneurship, private instruction, while it may have created a bit of a dilemma in players developing by playing too much versus having everybody a chance to develop. That's sort of what's happened in the States. Dom, can you comment on that statement? You've got two daughters, they could play with Team Canada, and they might, I don't know if they could play with the USA, but you're watching development in female hockey there. The numbers are rising, and you being involved in the Sharks program, the pro teams minor hockey program, it seems to have a better starting base than we do here in Canada. Any comments?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I could speak just for San Jose because that's obviously where we're at, and I think it's, you know, obviously I have three daughters that play, so I have a vested interest in improving the program. I know from a standpoint of their overall, like the numbers they have 300 mites per year that come into their program, and that's every year. That being said, at the 15s this year, they were barely able to fill a team on AAA on the boys side. So it's not for the lack of funds or numbers. It seems, on the boys' side, anyways, once they get to a certain level, they all think that they should be going someplace else. It's not good enough, and they got to go to Shaddix. They got to pay $60,000 to go to Shaddix, and this and that, and everything else. And on the girls' side, it's relatively the same, and hopefully trying to change that. So just to give you perspective, so my daughter's a 2006, and there are three girls that are leaving from 2006. Two are going to Shattuck St. Mary's. And one of them, or actually all three are going to Shattuck St. Mary's, paying $60,000 to go per year to go to high school. And the 05 group, the one ahead of that one, I think there was 7 girls that left that were going to Exeter, Chicago Young Americans, Mission, but if you go back to the 2008, 2007 group, when my middle daughter is in, we had 40 girls try out over the weekend for that group. And so in previous years, because so for U14, they'd have 2 birth years, and they would pick a first team, and they would have 15 players. And then the other 15, they wouldn't even have a coach. And they are not a goalie, and there was no consideration. So they would end up going to play with boys, or trying to manage where they would play. And that's so for 2 years. This is our 3rd year being a part of the program. So the 2 previous years, there was this mass exodus. And so I basically I'd said, hey, listen, let's instead of developing a group of 15 or 16, let's develop a group of 32. So basically we had about 40 girls, and it just basically said, hey, we're going to pick the 32. Yes, there's going to be a AAA with the top 16, 17, and then we're going to have the other 16, 17, and like we'll practice together. They only get 3 ice times a week. They get 1 on Wednesday, and then they get Saturday, Sunday. And so I said, okay, well, let's try it. I'll coach. We can run. There's Mark Smith, former NHL player, who has a daughter who's going to help out. And then I have a former collegiate player from Aurora, who is moved to the area, Canadian girl that married, or her fiance is in law enforcement in San Jose. She's helping out. And I said, here's our crew, and let's try this. And so we only lost 1 player. So we had 31 players that basically committed and said, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We had the benefit of having the last month prior, having ice times, and being able to just basically, have an emphasis on the girls. Because I think what happens is on the boys side, like at least here in California, they have the numbers, but they don't have anybody that pays any attention to. I'll just be honest, they don't pay attention on the girls' side anyways. When they're younger, they're like, oh yeah, we've got a dad that's going to look after it. Oh yeah, the girls' team, yeah, you're fine. And so the better girls feel like, I need to play with boys to be able to it's so much better. These girls can't even make a pass, and I'm just better served to be playing with boys because the team is better. And so what happens is that these girls that play with boys all the way growing up, and then they end up coming with the girls, a lot of them they play defense. None of them play forward, because they always put the girls on defense, because they can skate and they can angle and they can dump it out of the zone, and they can stand it up at the blue line. And so either they play defense or they're so timid that they have no confidence to hang on to the puck. So I've seen, and I have this from the last year that that we had. It was 06, 07 birth years. The step that the girls have taken just by just empowering them to be able to I use Wally's line all the time. Treat it like your cell phone, girls. Like you would never throw it away. And I get like these looks on their faces, like, "Oh my God, what do you say about my cell phone?" But the and I think like the growth curve on girls is so incrementally steeper than it is of boys because they pay attention, and when they're dialed in, they as I say, and I say it all the time, with boys you got to hit them over the head with a tack hammer to get them to lit like 10 times to get them to do the one thing maybe some of the time. And with girls, you've got to be careful as to not give them too much information, because a lot of times they'll take that too literally, and that's so. I mean, I would say in summary, Wally, yes, there are the numbers here. I think that at least in San Jose, there needs to be. And again, I'm here and because of my girls, and my youngest one is a 2010, so I'll be a part of the program here for a while. But they just need to have the same consideration that they do for the boys, and they don't. And I guess that's probably across the board. But there is quite a bit of talent coming out of this area, and I say there are the numbers. It's just that at those crucial ages, I would say between like 12U to 14U, there just has to be a more concerted effort to be able to have, people that either have girls and understand that they don't want just to be like, you have to treat them like athletes. Just don't treat them like you think, oh yeah, no, like, that's too rough for them or whatever else. Because that's the part of it too. Like I've had great guys I get along with well, and they played on teams with the boys, and they treat them differently. And like my daughter has been like, well, like why? Like just treat me like a player. Don't treat me like anything different. So need to have parents that have had girls involved and then understand that how because then you'll understand that you can't be so literal and it has to be conceptual. So
Wally,
muted, Wally.
your mic's off, Wally.
Yeah, I got 1,000 directions I could go, but I'm going to defer to Kim and then Bob with their hands up. Okay.
No.
And now, Kim, your mic's off. Haha.
Well, you got to follow Wally's lead, right? I mean, obviously. No, I would say, obviously I could chat girls hockey all day, but I think, Dom's point, the most competitive age groups are actually U13 and U15, ironically, because once you get to U18, it's watered down. There's too many teams and there's too many tiers. So there, for give you an example, at U18 AA, which used to be called midget AA, there's 55 teams in the province. Now at that same age group, there's 20 PWHL teams. So they play, they're all the same age. They're all grade 10 to 12, maybe a couple overagers, right? So now we say arguably there's 75 plus teams at that age group in the province, right? At Bantam AA, right, which would be U15, there might be 30 teams in the province or 24 teams in the province, because a lot of centers can't support, that age group at that level if they're a smaller center. Pee Wee AA has even less teams playing at and again, this is the AA level. So it is actually, when I watch the games, the Pee Wee AAs, like if the high level Pee Wee AAs and Bantam AAs are quite elite, and they track quite linearly up into the midget AA and the junior levels, because they really are playing the best of the best, as strange as that sounds. At that time, of course, we know how players can develop. But it does seem, to Dom's point, it is a crucial year. Obviously, when the boys go to hitting, you see a lot of girls come over. But, in the experience I've had with girls coming over, from playing boys AAA, AA, sometimes single A, that panic button tends to go off far too quickly. And I think a lot of that is what they learned in boys. But, I have to encourage them quite a bit to hang on to the puck because they're used to getting rid of it much more quickly. So it is, that poise versus panic is a really important piece. And if they stay in the boys too long, it's been my experience, occasionally you get a forward. You're right, Dom. The majority of them are Ds or goalies. But they tend to throw the puck away far too quickly from where they need to. And that's the biggest piece for learning for when they transition over.
Bob, your hand's up?
No, it
No.
isn't.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Tom is now. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, like, that was the reason why I made everybody play every position. And because they were all defense coming in and are the majority, and the way they were taught to play defense was, okay, I'm going to stand on the blue line and wait for the play to come, and then I'm going to, like, all of a sudden the play is coming and I'm going to fire back, and they're at the top of the circles as they cross the red line, and because they didn't know any better, right? But that was the thing. And now we've got girls that were defense, if you will, since 10U, and now we're like, this is awesome, love playing, and now they're playing up front. Now, will they ever be able to like, what's their ceiling? I don't know, but they went from being close to quitting to now just being so engaged that they're they love it. And I guess ultimately for me, I guess part of it is just in not being so restrictive of their position.
I've got a point that I don't know if everybody's understands the lay of the land, and I'm just using Calgary as an example. And I think Al might be able to speak to this a little bit more. But I'm dealing with Sam Holmes, Girls Hockey Calgary. And at what level do you call it elite? And they have what I call a community program, and then they have an elite program. And at the community program, Sam is faced with the dilemma of parents and players. The percentage might be more like 80%, wanting you to create first lines, second lines, third lines at that age. And obviously it leads to double shifting those players and playing all critical situations, which inhibits their enjoyment and the development of many of them. That's what's happening out here. And I just don't know that there's any solution to that. But Al, your hand's up, and then Tom. So I got my 2 bits in. That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I was just going to add on a little bit about kids hitting the panic button. I think that starts at a really young age. I've seen around here, at least in our area, where the play will be in the defensive end, and the coach will be yelling over the bench to get it out, right? And like, you just hear it all the time in the rinks. And from my perspective, we've had a lot of success with just telling the kids, like, make a play, make a pass, skate the puck, don't ever throw it away. If you lose it and they take it and you score, like, it's not the end of the world, we'll get it back, right? And to just have that patience to be able to let them make those mistakes, I think goes an awful long way for them to learn to not hit the panic button. But you got to live with the fact that sometimes they're going to make a pass right in front of the net to somebody else, and they're going to do something, that probably they shouldn't be doing, right? Because they're little kids. So, I don't know, that's my 2 cents on that. Actually, to your point, Wally, about the elite thing. So I actually we had our parity tournament here last weekend, and it's funny. We did all right. There's the way it is here. There's the town hockey, but then the club hockey is kind of separate, and that's your AAA organizations. But within that club world, there's an elite division, underneath that, there's a tier 1 platinum, they call it, and then there's a gold division underneath that, which has 2 divisions, right? So, we were playing in the lower of those divisions, and one of the parents was fine at the tournament, but apparently had contacted the hockey director about being frustrated about being at the lowest level and all this kind of stuff, and about it being a development program, and that's not what they're there for, that kind of thing. And I had a great conversation with our hockey director where he was like, well, even with our elite teams, like they're 10, they're 9, they're 8, even our elite teams are development programs. And, we kind of had a great conversation over that. But yeah, it starts young. I mean, they've got 6-year-olds playing the elite.
Go ahead, Tom. I think you're next. Hand up.
Yeah, I think my grandson was saying that, talking about what Dom says, my grandson was saying that a lot of the AAAs in Calgary are now, Willie started that hockey academy near Medicine Hat, Willie Desjardins. I guess a lot of the Royals kids, a lot of kids in Calgary, instead of playing AAA next year, they intend to go to that academy, the Banff Academy he bought, and he moved it there. And Banff Academy never did have very good players, but so that's another thing. So they're going to be playing $35,000 or something instead of playing the AAA. So they're chasing the dream.
Go ahead, Kim.
Oh, I wanted to relay a little tidbit that I had happen to me 2 days ago. I had a coach from our organization email me and said, "How old's your middle daughter?" I said, "She's 5." He goes, "Oh, I have a group of 2016s and some coaches who want to get them going. And, I know all these guys, some of them run hockey schools and all, and we should start getting them on the ice." And again, my daughter would love it, but it's like they're like, "Okay, and you're going to get kids and they're going to come to the camp." And these are U7, like they're 5-year-old girls. So I'm like, okay, like just take a breath. We're not going to have stuffed animals on the ice, but obviously they were brainstorming amongst themselves and thought, hey, let's ask Kim to see how old her daughter is and we'll loop her in. So they're sort of recruiting based on, one played in the NHL, one of the dads, one of the, the other dads played in the O, et cetera, et cetera. So I just thought it was an interesting tidbit that they're now, I guess, hoping that my genetics, maybe my daughter will be better than me, hopefully, is what they're hoping. But I just thought it was interesting that that's how it works at those young age groups. I guess I haven't, I've been at junior so long, you have your pick of the litter. But obviously I'm going to have to get Sammy's daughter to play goalie for us because she's clearly going to be an elite level goalie. So it might be a bit of a commute for you, Sammy, but we'll make it work.
Go ahead, Sammy.
It might be a little bit of a commute for sure. I had actually one of Kenzie's friends who, my daughter's also 5, and played hockey last year. Kenzie just skated and stuff, but this dad was really disappointed that girls hockey does not have super 7s or super 6s? I'm not sure what it is, but boys hockey has that. So
super 7s, yeah.
Super 7s. Doesn't want to get his daughter into girls hockey because he just feels like if they don't have that, then it is basically all downhill. And so, why wouldn't they have that? And he was all over me about it. And why isn't Kenzie going to play super 7 boys or whatever it is? And I said the same thing. I was like, well, she's okay just playing baseball and soccer and gymnastics right now. We'll just see how it goes. But it's hard to have those conversations when as an elite athlete, your trajectory was different, and they all think a certain way, and it's almost like you feel bad saying anything. And so I don't know, Kim, you've probably run into this way more in your profession, but what do you say to people to kind of rein it in without because they have these dreams and these passions and they want the best for their kids, and so what do you say, I guess?
Well, I know for me, I'm lucky because, I didn't learn to play or skate till I was 13. Some would argue I never really did learn to skate, but I could play. So that's like the very easy homegrown answer. I turned out okay, given that trajectory. But, I just emphasize the skill side of it. I said, if you decide you want to be really into it, spend your money and time on, doing skills. And again, not like fun stuff, but it's the overemphasis on games and tournaments and spring hockey. Oh my God, spring hockey here, like is wow. You could make a whole living just coaching spring hockey. You never have to work the rest of the year. So that's what I say is, obviously multi-sport and do, a bunch of different things. And that never seems to be a problem with the girls, quite honestly. All the kids are in my camp this week. They're all getting changed in the parking lot in the van to go to lacrosse or soccer or whatever. In the girls' game, I don't see a lot of the early specialization that I see that might exist in the boys' side. It really, I don't think is a big issue with the girls. But I just encourage them that, like, the point is not to get super competitive early. It might, if you want to become really skilled, it is a huge advantage for girls hockey if you're doing more skill clinics and playing more small area games in that, because most girls don't do that early on. So that might set you on a pretty good path, if you can. But again, you get the late bloomers, and I see them all the time who were playing house league last year, make the A team, and then are double A in 2 years. And that still does happen quite a bit in girls hockey.
Well, that's great advice, because I feel like as you and I navigate this world with younger kids, people will try to rope us into those bigger, brighter, the big lights of doing more and putting more money into it. But that's some great advice to be able to give to these parents that I just always feel bad. I don't want to squash their dreams either. I just know it's wrong.
Well, I'll tell you, Sammy, when I'm like in the parking lot this week, there's like hockey camps running everywhere, right? And I drive my big obnoxious truck with my logo and everything on it. So I get a lot of emails this week from parents of the boys that are on the other side, right? So their son is practicing. They have a daughter who plays. They didn't know I existed. And they're just frantically sending these emails. Like, what do you offer this and this and this and this? And it's like, my boy does this, 400 times a week. Like, what do you have for my daughter? And there just seems like this urgency that they must have learned from being on the boys' side. And it just, they're so excited to have something specific for their daughter. And actually, it's been interesting speaking to a few of them, because of course they corner me in the parking lot, which always takes a little longer than I expect. And, a lot of them have actually relayed, unfortunately, of the 5 conversations I've had in the last 2 weeks, 3 of them said they had their daughters playing with the boys from a young age, and they didn't have great experiences, that there was some bullying and some picking on. And then they brought them over to the girls, and they thought that the girls weren't quite serious enough. And now their daughters aren't playing because they don't know, like, they don't want to go back to the boys because they were getting picked on or didn't feel included, perhaps. But they didn't feel like the girls were good enough for their daughter. Right. And so now a couple of them actually have taken their daughters out, which I don't think is the right solution. But I wasn't aware, I haven't heard stories about that, of girls playing boys at a younger age and really being picked on. I guess I wrongly assumed that once you're 8, 9, 10, 11, and, you sort of.
Well, I can certainly tell you that I signed Kenzie up for baseball, and I don't know why I wanted her to play baseball as opposed to softball, but I went to an organization where it's going to be mixed, because she does that much better with girls around. And I know that about her. You know that about your kids. And I got the roster, and it was all boys. And so I emailed the organizers, and they're like, well, the coaches are actually 2 females, which is amazing. And so right at the last minute, another girl signed up. So we took her to baseball. And when I was talking to my dad about it, she's like, she'll be fine. You played with all boys your whole time. And I was like, yeah, but 100 of my peers quit and never played. I was the only one, so yeah, one makes it through and it becomes this like great thing. Right. But I had to kind of sit my dad down to be like, some kids, that's just not for them. Like, you need to know what is good for your kid. And yeah, anyway, so I found that interesting, that old school mentality despite all of that. So I digress. Tim has a question.
Well, thanks, Sammy. Not a question so much as just a comment, because I always feel like it's so easy for us, and I'm guilty as anybody, to denigrate or be negative about the game playing mentality, basically in Canada, versus practicing and skill development. And as I always am quick to point out, like, there needs to be a balance. I started thinking, like when Kim said, oh, somebody's recruiting her 5-year-old to start on a team. It's like, well, okay, I'll let her play, but you got to let them play. I don't want her out there being given 1,000 instructions. Let her fall in love with the game. And, you know, Wally, we see this all the time in the work that we did with P3 down in Medicine Hat, all those multiple puck games for the learning kids so that everybody goes home and has scored a goal and can get excited about the game. I think that gets lost a lot of time where like we tend to all overcoach and want to impart all of our wisdom on these kids instead of just letting them play the practice. And that would be at the PWHL level too. Why don't we scrimmage more? Why don't we just have more East-West games, let them play and enjoy the game a bit more? So it's always a balance. You can't do all of one, all of the other, but I think that the scale is now tipping to the point where everybody's spending all their time doing skills and practicing and instead of just playing.
Yeah, and I think what I was speaking about is, you know, that people seem to have this driving desire to play structured games, like what they see, you know, on the television, right? And the score being kept and all of those things. But, you know, it's funny, I said to my daughter, I said, well, if there are other girls your age, you know, would you want to come on the ice with mommy? And she goes, yeah, what are their names? What are the girls' names? And I was like, I don't know their names. She's like, I need to know their names. I was like, oh, okay. So I have to find their names, right? But this is, you know, again, I think sometimes we talked about this, maybe it was last week or the week before, like, you know, I'm asking her whether she wants to do it. And she's not worried about like, is she going to become an Olympian or something? She doesn't even know what that means. She just wants to like know what the girls' names are. So she can go and make some new friends, right? So I think that gave me some good perspective there. But, you know, I do think if you have parents who have the passion and some baseline knowledge to be able to teach basic skill to these players, because again, as we talked about earlier in the call, I do think that's missing. I do think you have a lot of great volunteers who are happy to help out at the U7 and U9 level with the girls, but they haven't been taught enough of how to run, you know, skill drills that are still fun in small area games. They go right into flow drills, and I'm sure you've all seen flow drills with U7 and U9 players. It takes them 45 minutes to get to the other end of the ice to complete the flow drill because they lose the puck 12 times, you know. So I do think they're, you know, and I think in Europe, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, I think they have their better coaches actually coaching at the younger levels and developing them early on. So I guess I'll be doing that for a couple of years as my daughters are young, but I do think it is missing. And those coaches, those volunteer coaches know it. They know they don't have the right resources. And because they're not skills instructors, they default to more flow drills or, you know, things they're familiar with from their own playing days. So, you know, I think the education of coaches at those younger ages who are volunteers needs to be better for sure.
I think you're up, Wally.
Yeah, Kim, related to that, before COVID, I was watching a female U12 practice, girls hockey Calgary. They had a real cross-section of kids out there. And the opening activity drill was a neutral zone double touch pass, 2-on-0 rush. Well, and they stayed with it a long time. And there were a couple of players who I think were above the skill of everybody. And I sat there watching. I was supposed to speak to some of the board. Sam in particular was in a board meeting, and I watched this exercise where they really didn't understand the cross section of kids, and it did no good. It was the coaches trying to do a drill they had seen, copied from YouTube, applying it to an age group where they just didn't have the skills to do that drill. And so you're better off to create small area games, increase the activity, and let them play and have fun. If you cannot teach the skills to be done in the drills, that's the dilemma. Now, I don't know. I'm going to go back to Tom Malloy here. And I know we're talking about young girls, but I'm going to Tom and mentioning the Royals organization, and you've heard that some players are going to Willie's camp next year. Is that correct, Tom?
Your mic's off, Tom.
I don't know if he's still on.
Yeah,
Or...
yeah. My grandson, who played in the Royals, so he knows a lot of the kids. He said that's what's happening is there's, I guess, one kid from the Royals is going to play for the Tigers next year, and so a whole bunch of them. And I would assume they've been recruiting from the AAA, that Willie's been doing that.
Yeah.
But there's just that perception that the sports schools are better.
Yeah. Well, I have an insight on that situation. I did the mission statement exercise with the 4 lead board members. And one of them, the president, I'm pretty close to. He's an older fella, my age, but I mentored him in the Northeast. And he's adamant about the philosophy of development, low play, and managing the bench better, because my only fear is if they just played games, it would be good if they played everybody. They'd have more fun. But they don't. They just play the best players in all situations to try to win games. And now that's the dilemma, I think, out there with the so-called private programs and elite teams. If they manage the bench fairly to develop everybody and allow them to play, I wouldn't have any difficulty with that. But it's that model and those players leaving for that reason. And I think let them leave and just let the group of people that wants to contribute to development. In the long term, you're going to be better off and have more success. So somebody asked a question about the board members. The one was the president, Dale Peters, and I've been on the phone with him twice a week. I'm looking for, got a call from a Drumheller Dragons looking for a young, enthusiastic assistant coach, and Dale reached out to a couple of his existing head coaches to see if they were interested in that opportunity. And he's very open-minded about coaches developing and players developing. And those players leaving could be his demise in an organization. So the effort to do it right in the right way, Kim, you've been able to do that over a long period of time where you are. And I think that's a challenge that we all face. And your kids are growing up, Kim and Sami, and going through that now and experiencing that. So that's just my thoughts on it, how it all connects. It really does connect. How young do you get too serious about winning and your kid developing to be on a so-called winner, whatever that means? So, Kim, you have your hand up?
Jeez, I'm going to get this mute thing down soon. It's the Ivy League degree, right? Right, Tim? Didn't go to the right school. So I was going to say that with the academies, I wonder if part of it, and we don't have a lot of academies in Ontario, like they're just not a big thing. And I think that's tends to be because the level of the leagues that we have are sort of meant to be or supposed to be the highest level. So players aspire to that as opposed to more of the academy format. But I wonder if some of, either the sales pitch or the intrigue for the academy is the fact that they could train a little bit more and get on the ice more. And again, I can't speak to how that looks in Calgary or any other, city, but I know on the girls' side, if you're only practicing twice a week and you've got, 1 or 2 games and, some parents, some players, that may not be enough ice, right? Especially if your team practices aren't at all skill heavy, right? So, I can only speak to my experience and when I was at the Peak School for elite athletes, I was there for 5 years with the girls hockey program, and that's where Connor McDavid went. So I never taught him anything, but boy, did he look good on the ice. And we never played any games. This was actually, I think, a very good model. We didn't play games. we just skated in the morning for 45 minutes, 4 days a week. And I would spend 45 minutes working on backhand passes. Like I had no performance drive to say, okay, well, these girls need to be able to beat school X next week, or, I need to shorten the bench so that we win in the third period. Because we didn't play games, right? They all developed tremendously, and all of them went on to play college hockey. So I'm not suggesting that's the ideal format, because of course, those girls also played in their club system. And, for some of them, it was enough hockey. For some of them, it might have been too much hockey. And we certainly didn't bag skate them in our skills sessions, but it was pure skills to supplement what they did in their team environment. So, again, I think that's a pretty unique type of model. But I know it had a lot of success on the boys' side. There's quite a few of those guys who are in the NHL now. And when we had a girls program, it was quite successful. And I think the lack of team play or driving those players to play together as a unit was extremely valuable. I don't know whether parents would necessarily fork out the money for something like that if they then had to fork out the money for a club team as well. But in terms of player development, that's by far the best model I've ever taught in, because again, we could really hammer down skills and do stationary passing or do snapshots or do things that in a typical team practice, you're not always going to slow things down and get super technical. So, that was my experience at an academy, but my sense in the West is those are sort of their full-time teams. That's not, it's not in addition to playing for a club team. If I'm correct, I might be wrong.
Yeah, I think you are correct, Kim. I think they're a little more prevalent out west here. I think partly because of the numbers game. Like, there's a lot fewer players, so the higher leagues, at least in a lot of people's perception, it's harder to collect enough good players together in various communities to have a high quality team. So that's partly how it got off the ground, I think, more so out west. I don't know. But there certainly is, as you mentioned, a real value, all those sports schools, and Dom's maybe going to be getting into one or is into one. Being on the ice every day is a huge bonus of those, like you pointed out, of those programs. Like, how do you replace 2 extra hours of practice every week, if that's what it is, if what it came down to? Like, that's invaluable in terms of your skill development, your player development, your hockey sense development. So there is definitely some value there. Go ahead, Dom.
Yeah, I was just going to add, because I've looked at a lot of the models of the different sports schools, like, for instance, the Edge in Calgary, and then there's Nichols in Buffalo, or there's, whether it's North Star Academy in Minnesota. And, I think from my perspective, the thing that was attractive to me, and I wish I had it when I was growing up, is the ability to play another sport. There's 30 sports at the school that I'm at. And so, for instance, like, I'm having conversations with the baseball coach as to when our schedule is going to end and when theirs is going to begin, because that's important to me from so many different reasons, that they play another sport, especially. And I get it that, certain, they're like, well, I really need to focus on hockey. And I'm like, well, there's a girl that came and that really loves softball. And she's like, you know what, I really haven't had the time to play. And I'm like, well, that to me is one of the main reasons why you would be coming to this school, is that I would be, like, open to be able to play a different sport. I know I have my girls playing soccer, and it's a constant struggle. Like, there was clubs here that they wouldn't take my girl. They're like, you absolutely cannot miss. Like, everybody preaches the multi-sport and long-term athletic development, but when it comes to taking field time or ice time away from their team, then they want nothing to do with it. So we picked our soccer club, based on the fact that, like, from the beginning, I said, there'll be times that we miss, and we'll let you know when we won't be there. But that's just the way it's going to be. And I've gotten into it with hockey coaches that they have dry land in the parking lot. They're running them around the parking lot, and our girls are going to soccer practice, and they'll be like, well, they can't miss dryland. I'm like, well, they're going to be at soccer practice. Well, no, they can't. They can't miss. They really, really can't miss. I said, well, I guess you should pick somebody else, because like that's. But and again, you know, if it's my parents that when I went through it, and if someone had mentioned them to them that we would miss, they would be okay, right? Because they don't know, right? They wouldn't have known any better. So I think from from my perspective, the multi-sport thing, like I see it, like, and again, seeing some of our guys with the overuse injuries, like there's a first round pick that was through our program with Calgary, and he first round pick, and by the time he was 22, he literally like he he wasn't progressing. He was elite when he was 10, and only played one sport, and he had hip issues, shoulder issues, and to be honest, it was like he's burnt out. He was absolutely burnt out to the point where he just really didn't care anymore, right? He had just been hockey all the time from when he was whatever age, probably or probably 10 on, and he just didn't have the fire. And the guys that made it, or a lot of the guys, or I shouldn't say the guys, most of the guys that I find that make it, like you ask them if they played different sports growing up, and the majority have. And their athleticism is better. Again, I'm generalizing, but if I were to take a snapshot and say the vast majority of the guys that are able to improve in their 20s and their mid 20s and are able to adapt to as the levels go higher, I would say the multi-sport dimension is one that is a common theme. So, so short-sighted that, I've been told this multiple times living here in California, well, they need to 13 is the year that they should be, sport specific. And I really, really disagree. And as I say, in our program here, that is one thing that you have to play. Like I'm telling kids they're coming in, you have to play a couple sports. Sorry, and some of them are, well, I don't have another sport. I kind of play golf. I said, okay, well, you're going to, you're going to have to, that it's just, if you want to come here, that's just a part of the part of the deal. So again, that's something I really believe in. And again, seeing it from the top down, I see the effects of guys that only play the one to me, it's detrimental.
Kim?
I think it's interesting. I remember one of Matt's players, who was one of my captains, who's now going to be his captain. She used to skate with me in the summer, and she played soccer as well. And she happened to have a soccer game immediately after our ice session, so just around the back of the building. She's like, "Oh, I play soccer," and I have soccer practice. You don't know if they're playing like house league soccer or high level soccer, and so me and my coaches went back, and wasn't she the best player on the team by like a country mile? And it was, they were playing this high level team from Hamilton who just, annihilated them. But their whole team strategy is like, get the ball to this kid. And she's like, yeah, I just play soccer. And so I think it's very interesting with the girls. We used to say, and I know Sammy would know this, right? Like if you put any Olympian in another sport, they're probably pretty elite at that other sport. If you put, if you had the Olympic team play soccer, like they probably are going to look okay. Some will be more elite than others, but I think with the girls, they're really, I just don't see a lot of specialization, to be honest with you. They are the rarity. What I do see is, what Dom is saying about, the junior coaches, the midget AA coaches saying, well, you can't miss for anything, to the point where kids will make OFSA, Ontario championships in another sport. And the coach is like, well, you can't miss practice. Like you can't miss practice to go win an Ontario championship. Well, because it's, and again, I think we lose a little bit of perspective here. And we all know the benefit of playing the multiple sports and what that's going to bring back to the kids. But, the only time I've ever, incited that rule is if we're like second or third round of the playoffs and you have a practice and it conflicts with our practice, then I'm going to ask you to maybe choose hockey over that, but it is quite normal, mostly with the older age groups here with girls, to say, well, you can never miss anything. I don't even know what the consequences would be. I guess, like, I don't know if you would take them on the team or if it's just a threat, an idle threat, to say you can never miss anything to try and scare the girls. But I've never seen the multiple sports hurt a player. It's never been something that's hindered their development. It's only helped their development. Now hopefully that would translate to the boys' side, but it sounds like it doesn't. And they're just hockey all the time.
Yeah, I think I would probably wholeheartedly agree with your last statement, Kim. Like, I'm a big multi-sport person myself. Like, I don't think that could ever really hurt you. The big debate, of course, is when do you start to specialize? As Dom mentioned, like, pretty hard to argue against anything, sort of, except for me, it would be sort of in that 13, 14, 15 age range where you really got to zero in if you want to be an elite player. And I would just dearly love someone to really delve into that and do a really long-term study of all the elite players, both on the female side and on the male side at the NHL and Division I in Europe and stuff like that. Just how many multi-sport athletes are there? How long were they multi-sport athletes? How many specialized from the age of 8 in their sport? Like, what do the numbers really say? I would love to see that study, or somebody do that study, because I think it'd be really, really interesting. But just to sort of counterpoint to your comment, Kim, about maybe all the Olympic athletes would be naturally really good multi-sport athletes. Now, my Vermont team was anything but Olympic level hockey players, but certainly they were elite level hockey players in one sense of the word, Division I hockey players. But I was honestly shocked when we did play team building games like kickball in the gym or something, how many totally unathletic people we had on the team that couldn't catch a big round utility kickball when it's hit right to them. Like, they there was no athleticism. It was shocking. And undoubtedly, many of them did specialize, and maybe were only one sport, or maybe it's just that I had a lower level athlete at that time, but it's quite shocking. So.
Yeah, I mean, I had the girls play volleyball, so we have a beach volleyball. I've arranged, like, I'm busing girls in, and then just to see the campus, and we played beach volleyball, and then we'll take them on the ice and like a little bit of a camp. And you see, obviously, some of them that have played club, but even like some of the best girls and there's one girl from Toronto. She moved here her dad played our coach AAA a couple years ago with the son, and the daughter's really good. She's 2008, but even catching the ball, so I had to obviously modify the volleyball game where the ball came over the net, and you just catch it, and then you threw it to a teammate who then bumped or set it back over top, and she had zero idea. Like, the ball was coming over, and it was, and in my head I was like, this is all the more reason that she needs to be exposed to these different stimulus. Like, how much better would she be if you were to be able to, like, have her doing these other types of sports? So again, she's 13, I guess, right? And, like, for all intents and purposes, like, she's gone to these Western Select, like, probably, maybe Tim, maybe, I don't know who you had watching. She was probably there, one of the kids, and she was one of the better ones on those teams. So again, about their longer term athletic development, like, they need to play other sports. Like, in my opinion, is they need to play other sports, because it's just like anything. If someone were to sit there and throw me a ball and I would volley it back, or I'd bump it back, and yeah, that would grow old really, really fast. But if all of a sudden, like, I played a game, like, they would, intuitively figure out ways of shaping their body. And I mean, yeah, there's the deliberate practice that would need to be done initially at the beginning, but I would think that, jumping, spatial awareness, like everything else that falls into a volleyball would be very beneficial for them to do. So to me, it should be a part of their development. And again, like, seeing some of the girls move that weren't moving very well. And I think part of that is just because they've never been exposed to it, right?
Sammy, I'm shocked by this swimming. I'm not a great swimmer, nor do I like swimming, but I want to hear more about this water polo story. And the
Jim, do you
swim
remember in
test.
2006 the
Oh, yeah.
triathlon?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It was fun.
Yeah. I mean, it just really shocked me with the lack of just pure survival ability. That this is just a sport to me it's not a sport. It is just water safety. You need to learn how to do this. And several did not have that or feel comfortable or, it was, I think we started to see sports specialization. The 2002 team was not like that at all. And it was different, and I think that was because those women, we all played a bunch of different sports because there wasn't these sort of aspirations. But the 2006 team started to see people that had gone to hockey schools, that had done all these things to get to that level, So I think that started to change the game in women's hockey for sure.
Yeah, that is an interesting. I never thought about that before. How the 2002 team would have been almost certainly all multi-sport for a long time. Multi-sport,
right? Because there was no other choice, right? Yeah.
And it was sort of that next generation that we started to see the specialization. So
yeah, right around that time. I mean, who knows? Studies would be interesting to know about that sort of time frame, the changeover. But
Sammy, in 2002 at Valcartier, and I had typed this out, but I deleted it because I don't think I had the right name. We were playing flag football, and there was a female athlete that could throw a football better than any quarterback I ever had.
probably Piper or Vicky Sanahara.
Yeah.
So Vicky Sanahara, if they had football in the Olympics, would have chosen it. She played a ton, and all of her Brampton teammates played with her on teams, but she was so good. So she could see the field. I watched them play several times. But then Piper, I don't know if you remember Piper. I mean, here's this young punk kid coming in with her UNC basketball shorts over her knees with high top basketball shoes on. And she was so fast. I mean, just so fast, and could sort of maneuver in and out. She was just an incredible athlete when it came to football, for sure. And she could chuck the length of the field.
I think Hef played a lot too, right, Sammy?
So Hef played with Vicky, but Vicky would have been the better player. Hef played football like she played hockey, and that she just went down the wing fast, and then Vicky would just Hail Mary pass to Hef, which is kind of how we played with Hef hockey too. Just let her go and then give her the puck way down the ice.
I know. I remember well at the boot camp there in PEI 2005 that they lobbied real hard to have some flag football thrown in one day, which was fun to watch.
Yeah, we also got to play a lot of those were really fun camps because we got to play. I think we played baseball. We did a lot of kind of random activities, one of which was water polo, which was my favorite, but not for most of my teammates, was not their favorite.
Yeah. A lot of, it was a long days, but fun days. It was really terrific. Just
and volleyball and Haibo and anyways, go on.
Soccer. Yeah. Everything. Just to change the topic just a little bit, because I didn't want to get off without getting your perspective, Sammy, on the and everybody else's on the Las Vegas goalie shuffle this week.
Interesting, right? I wish I knew.
And who starts tonight is the final.
Yeah, so I think Robin Leonard probably starts tonight because they lost. I mean, but the weight of the series do you go with your guy that got you there kind of thing? I mean, both are really great goalies. And what I like about what I'm seeing is from their two perspectives, as much as the media covers, they seem to really be supporting each other. And so, both cognizant that it is not their choices that this is happening. Robin Leonard has worked a lot with mental health. And so he's very vocal about some of the struggles and that Fleury has been there for him and that they are friends. And, but yeah, that would be tough to just the unknown, but I'm hoping that despite all this, there was these kind of plans and there was this kind of discussion and conversation. We talked a lot about this during the goalie symposium, the 3-day, how to coach goalies, and that these kind of things are okay to do as long as you're having these conversations with the goalies to let them know that, this is plan A, this is plan B, this is a plan all the way down to N, T, whatever. But, talk through those scenarios. How are you guys going to feel? How are you guys going to support each other? How should we tell you guys? All of those discussions need to be had with the goalie, so that it is done in the right way, so that mentally they are able to come back the next game to be able to play and be there for the team too. So I think Leonard's going to play. I don't know. We could probably do a poll on this call, but.
Any thoughts, Bob? Dom? Anybody? Matt?
I think it'll be Fleury.
You think it'll be Fleury?
Yeah, I think if you go back to last year when Leonard struggled, he put in Fleury and played the one game and went right back to Leonard. So I think he'll do the same thing again. And
do you think that it being in Montreal that they'll play Fleury because it's in Montreal?
No, I just think he'll play him because it's the guy that got them there. He did the same thing last year with Leonard. He give him a game off and put him right back in again. So I think he'll follow that same pattern. I think Fleury has been their guy all year, and I think last year when the controversy with the sword in the back, I think that was him saying to Fleury that, I mean, Pete didn't put the sword in his back, but the cartoon, whatever it was. But I think that was his way of saying that Leonard's our man, and we're sticking with him come hell or high water. He got us here, and we're gonna dance him the rest of the way. And I think we'll do the same thing with Fleury this year. I think it's the fair thing to do. And
do you think he's had that conversation with Fleury too?
I think they had a conversation before Leonard went in the net, and I think they've had a plan all along. You'll go in for a game, and
that's good.
And you go right back in. That's what I think.
Yeah, hopefully that's the way it should be, right?
I've got a question at that level. Traditionally, and Dom, you could speak to this, at an elite level, if you're hot, you stay in. If you win, you're in. If you lose, you're out. And Tim, you had mentioned on a text last night, you questioned the overcoaching. I thought Leonard came in, he won, he played very well. I would have started him again and not put in Fleury. And that's a gut call by a coach. And there's a point, Sammy, where you talk to your goalies and say, look, at times I'm going to make a gut decision. We may agree on, a philosophy of trying to get the most out of both of you. But in the end, the head coach has to be able to make a decision like that with both goalies, may not like, but they have to respect.
Yeah, you're so right, Wally. And we had, is it Torigny? Is that how you say his name? Who just won the World Championships?
Yes.
Alex.
Yes.
So he led one of the discussions one day, and he was like, I'm the head coach. Like, the goalie coach answers to me. When you guys are working with NHL clubs, you answer to me. I get to make the final decision. And I think you're right, Wally, that ultimately the goalie, it is the head coach's decision. But I think there can be conversations with the goalie in how do you want to have these conversations? How do you want me to tell you? Would you prefer I told you? Would you prefer the goalie coach? Before any of that happens, having that conversation to know how to, so that goalie can be the best for the next game, just in case. I think you always have to prepare one game in advance for the goalies, because mentally it can be fragile at times, as we all know, with goaltenders, and so you're preparing them. But I think you're right, Wally, that ultimately, sometimes it just doesn't go your way. It's a coach's gut decision, and you need to mentally prepare for that as well.
I think they've created a problem by the way they've handled that. And it's not the decision most people would have made, but I think most of the people that express their opinions are pretty knowledgeable hockey people. And I respect the head coach in his role. And if he made it based on his gut and his feeling, more power to him. They have the authority to do that. I just don't know at that level with two number one goalies, you create a bit of a predicament that requires a clear understanding of being able to coach with your gut. Because I think the best coaches do that. It's not analytics, it's not a book and theory and science. There's a point where at a time like that, a decision has to be made, and the head coach is going to make it, and he can take the heat for the loss, not the goalie.
Well, in this case, you've got two number one goalies. In most cases, you have a number one and a number two. What would be the difference if you had a 1 and 2? You would always go back to your number one, would you not?
No, I would go back to number
Unless the
one.
guy-
I agree with you, Bob. I've said you got two number one goalies. Leonard went in one game and played poorly. He wasn't good in the first game. In the second game, he was better than Fleury's been. And I'm judging that as a coach watching a goalie play, two goalies play in the playoffs. Who's best now? What's important now? It's not their feelings, their state of mind. It's who's performing. And at that point, Leonard had recovered and played a game. He won. He deserved to stay in the net, in my mind. But I think that's where I believe that overcoaching can be a problem. And I'm just saying that's the way I would handle that situation, but I'm not there and I'm not experienced enough to be there.
I don't disagree with you in principle, but did Fleury play bad, or was it a bad bounce with a spinning puck off the boards that hit the heel of the stick at the inappropriate time in the game? Maybe Stahl shouldn't have played the next game because he threw it out in front of his net in the first period and they scored on him.
Well, I think we're getting into debates that have nothing to do, with it. When you can judge the mistake the way you judge it, I judge it the way I judge it. That head coach has to filter what's happened and weigh what's happened to make a decision that is going to get the result. And to me, who knows how it's going to end up? But if it's easy to coach after the fact from a distance. Dom, you've got a point.
I think Matt was first,
Oh,
Wally.
sorry, Matt. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah. I mean, my gut tells me that they're going to go back with Leonard, but I don't know what's going on behind the scenes in Vegas, and we all know that there's a lot more to it than even though it's pretty comprehensive media coverage, and we're all hockey people. I'm sure there's things even we don't know. So I could be wrong on that. And you also look at the Islanders, right? They're blowing out 8-0, and they're back with Varlamov, and they pull it out. So it's every team is different in that respect. I've always felt that along with making player cuts, choosing between two very good goalies who are ready to go are the toughest decisions I've had to make as a coach. And sometimes there's no wrong answer, but obviously as a coach, if the game doesn't go as you had hoped, then it's on you in terms of that decision. And I've always found that extremely, extremely difficult. And I agree. Sometimes you're going with your gut. Some goalies are gamers as opposed to practice goalies. you're looking at past experience versus a certain team. You're looking at stats. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it, and sometimes it ends up just being a gut call. And sometimes those are very, very difficult, very difficult. I really like what Sami said. I think it's important not to lose sight of the process, and that's something I'm trying to work on these days in terms of the expectations and setting the roles and accepting the roles. And it's not necessarily a one size fits all. I like the idea of setting those expectations at the beginning of the season so that when it comes down to a really emotional and crunch time, everyone knows what to expect. And I also like the idea of giving the goalies themselves some input into the process in terms of when would you like to be told and by whom and when. And so I think that helps with again, yeah, as Sami said, that goalie's ability then to stay sharp, to support his or her crease mate and be ready for the next opportunity.
Go ahead, Dom.
Yeah, I mean, I can say our longest discussions at the minor league level is in regards to who's going to start. And I can say we've wasted numerous hours just, debating on this guy in, that guy in, this guy in, that guy in. So I can't imagine at the next level. And I can just one instance in which I was so my first couple of years of being in Calgary, we were in the playoffs against Anaheim, and they Bob Hartley was the coach and ended up making a decision which ultimately led to us winning. He pulled Hiller and Ramo came in, and I think we might have been down 3-1 at the time. It was against Vancouver. We ended up coming back in the game and ended up winning. And I asked Bob after the fact, I said, like, why'd you do it? He goes, I don't know. It's just a feeling. And I think ultimately, Wally touched on it. I think, whatever your process is, and at that level, there's now they have, like in Calgary, they have two. They have a director, and then they have the goalie coach for the Flames. And, whatever the process is going through, in my opinion, is whatever that process is that you've had over the course of the year, you stick to that, whatever that process is. And if it's been, if you win, you stay, or if it's, whatever that is, I think you have to, in my opinion, you have to follow that, because it was always weird to me when you were in the midst of a playoff series and you're going along, and then all of a sudden you change the way you did something, right? It worked up until that point, and I can appreciate why they were doing it, because they were trying to get a reaction, or they were trying to try something that wasn't going well, and they were trying something different. But I don't ever recall that ever working. I'll use the one thing that it was always like we would always be down, and then coaches would try to have like a highlight tape of our best moments. And in my head, I always thought, okay, there it is. There's our dead man walking. They're playing the video. They're playing the highlight tape of when we did everything well, because things aren't going well. And as opposed to, because for me, it was a clear indication that, okay, we've got to pull out all the stops because now it's getting desperate, as opposed to being, this is the way we do things, and this is the way we're going to continue doing. We're confident in the way that we're doing it, and if it's 3-0 and there's still a game to be played, well, it's just a matter of time before it turns. And I get it. There's everything that goes into it. So I guess in regards to the goalies, I would say whatever their process is, I would say like their semifinals, they've gone along, and the process in which they have is a result of what they've been doing up to this point. The seasons that they've lost, they've gone to the final, they lost in the first round. Like, they've gotten to this point, like their process is that. So stay to that. To me, as a player, you like, it's like flags are going off in your head when all of a sudden things are changing from the standpoint of why you're deciding who's in, or now they're trying to shake the tree, if you will, to make a change that way.
So many so many things to unpack. the one thing right off the top being like I always felt like the win you're in, the lose you're out process is, besides being very unfair to the goalies, it's kind of a cheater process where it takes all the burden off the coaches. Like I don't have to make a decision because it's way more complex than that. Like Sammy could stand on her head, play a great game, and we lose. Do you really want to take Sammy out the next day? It's way more complex than that. My sort of view on the whole Vegas thing is, number one, I was surprised at the initial change, but then when I thought about it, not surprised. Like when they put Leonard in, the image in my head was of Fleury after that overtime loss and that mistake he made in the game. He's been playing a lot. He's an old goalie. He was now in a bad mental state, as well as perhaps, as Elliot pointed out last night, a bit fatigued and maybe needed a physical rest, but he might have needed a mental rest as well. And you've got a number one guy in the bench. Like, why not make that change? So when I thought about it, I thought that made a lot of sense. I don't know if I would have had the guts to do it as a coach, but so good on Pete DeBoer for actually making that decision, because it obviously worked out really well for him. The more surprising thing to me was why he goes back to Fleury, not because Leonard played really well. The team found a way to win. And one of the most important factors is the team mojo. You're having a tough time beating this team. You finally found a way to get out a win. And now the coach is changing things. Like, I was really, really surprised that Fleury started game 6. And, he didn't play badly, so I'm not hanging the loss on him. But I was just really surprised that they didn't come back to Leonard. And I think maybe for all those reasons, my thought is Leonard will start tonight. The team needs a jolt. They're just stuck. And he provided that jolt. And, sometimes it's like changing the lines when the offense is stuck. We all do that as coaches. We tinker with the lines, change the lines. Sometimes you just need a change for the sake of the team's mojo. Like, hey, we're starting fresh. We got a chance. So it'll be interesting. Just some of my views on it. There's lots of stuff in there. It's pretty amazing how sort of complex this is. But I think the main thing is, like Sammy's pointed out, Dom, Wally, have a process, talk to the goalies, always have the backstop. Like Wally said, sometimes I just got to go with my gut, and that's part of the process. And then my last thought would be, if they'd chosen to start Fleury in game 6 or Leonard in game 6, I think Fleury totally buys into that. Hey, he played a solid game. He won the game. I'm okay with that. He's a professional. So I don't think that would have been a hard thing for DeBoer to do. So it's just really, really interesting on a lot of levels. Really interesting.
Any other thoughts?
We could talk about cross-checking. Oh my God.
Well, one of the things here is, and just generally speaking, Tim, we're exchanging a lot of text during the playoffs. And, this discussion on the goalies to me is, it's a little bit more than fans talking. And I think the gut is vital at this point in time. The art of coaching has more to do with the gut, and everything else is all gone into it. The analytics, the thinking, the sports psychology, the nature of your team. This is at the highest level. And even at lower levels, those of us that coach well, that have had success, have made gut decisions, and we've been able to explain them maybe after the fact to those players. And, I personally gone through that, and I rely on my gut more than my brain and I'll listen to the opinions of the other staff members. But in the end, if I'm the head coach, is he coaching with the gut or overthinking, coaching with the brain? And that is a huge art that I feel we don't need to talk about. We just need to understand, what does that mean? What goes into that process? Is that kind of a thinking going on, a feel for the game and making the right decision? And in a sense, and Matt, no offense, but there's two lawyers left competing in the final that may be thinking too much. And personally, I like the other two guys because they don't complicate things. And the players aren't caught up in the complication of their coaching. That, to me, what's the big picture has occurred here. And I think the players, they know, they feel, they respect the coach. And that's why they got as far as they did. So I think everything we're talking about gets down to, we can say what we want, what you think, what I think, and I'm going to do what I would do in that situation for my reasons. And I don't care what you think, really, because it's done and we're moving forward and going to see a consequence. There's a lot to learn from it, but the most important thing is, and I think Sami made the point, and she's just had this elite goalie clinic with Hockey Canada that she spoke highly of. And that head coach, he summed it up. It's his call. In the end, he's thought of everything we've talked about. They had better have, or they shouldn't be coaching at that level. That's my point here. You've got to make the best decision. Bob Hartley made it, and he might have made some that didn't work out. But the best ones seem to make the best decisions at the right time. So I'll leave it at that. That's probably a silver dollar worth right there. Okay.
I guess I might add too that just for anyone listening out there that like we've all been saying, I think the main thing is to, as Sami said, talk to your goalies and find out what's good for them, what helps them prepare for the games, how do they want to be handled as part of your process in making that decision. But then the other big piece is if you go about your process as a head coach, you make a decision like the board did, realize for sure that the resulting phenomenon is out there where people are going to second guess you depending what the result of your decision is. That doesn't mean it was a bad decision. Just because it doesn't turn out the way you would like or your team would like or anyone would like, doesn't mean it was a bad decision. If you had a process, you followed the process, and even if part of that process includes your gut instinct, as long as you're taking all of that in and making an intelligent decision with what you know in the moment, then it's a good decision. And that's partly why I think hey, win you're in and lose you're out is not really a good process, because it doesn't take in, it's not an intelligent decision. It's just it's an easy decision and not a fair one in lots of cases. So
Tim, no coach would make a black and white decision on what you said. If you had a great game and you played well, I'm not pulling you. If you lost, that's not a rule. It's a guideline. And you have the flexibility to make a decision outside of that parameter. The simple process is thinking, if you win, you win. If you lose, you lose. Fleury played poorly the game before. Leonard played really well. Decision to me is simple. Now, it's easy to say that, but I'm just saying that's coaching with your gut. And I'm not saying I'm black and white and I don't think. I think but I feel better than I think. That's me as a coach. Now,
Well-
whether or not DeBoer or any other coach has that same, how do they think? How do they feel? How do they end up making their decisions? I think that's the interesting part of this. This whole playoffs to me is the most exciting I've ever seen from a sport coaching, sports psych point of view. And it really is an interesting competition. And I've always watched the coaches more than I watch the players and what the players are doing or aren't doing, how they're monitoring behaviors and mindsets and where players are at. So, boy, these are exciting times to be watching.
I think Tom had his hand up. I will say, I'm pretty sure there are quite a few coaches out there that's their basic approach. If you win, you stay in. If you lose, you're out. But Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, well, my opinion is I thought Leonard looked so composed, especially when Caulfield went on that breakaway. And I think he has Fleury figured out. And he really didn't give him that top corner he likes to go to, and he tried to go between the legs. I thought he looked so composed, I would have gone with Leonard. And then, Sammy, I've got Alberta has really top midget girl players like U18. I mean, St. Albert's won the Canadian Championship about the last 3 years, and the Edge wins the school one, and U of A is champion about every second year. So the female hockey out here is pretty good. So anyways, I have a camp this weekend, and I got 2 new goalies. One was about third top in the midget league the last 3 years. And then I got a 6-foot goalie from northern BC. And of course, neither one of them, I just saw a video of her playing. They played their AAA boys Bantam team, and she was stoning those guys pretty good. So we're having a camp starting tomorrow. It'll be the first time I've met either one of them. It's just a funny year recruiting because nobody's playing. So you're doing everything, talking to coaches and watching online and this sort of thing. So I kind of wish you were out here helping me work with my goalies, but just thought I'd throw that in there.
Tom, I'm sure that by osmosis, you'll do really great.
Go with your gut, Tom. Go with your gut.
Well, I've already signed them both, so I don't really have to go with my gut anymore.
Oh, but you need a process and then go with your gut.
Well, the process is they're good goalies, and I signed them.
Yeah.
My other goalie that played last year was going to come back for the last time, but she got a contract in Sweden, so she's going over to Sweden. So
I've noticed that goalies that stop the puck are generally pretty effective. It doesn't matter what they look like.
and I'm also talking to a girl, and you'd recruited her at UFC, but she's a Aboriginal girl, and she's from Kamloops. And with all that stuff going on out there, I'm not hearing much from her, so I don't think she's coming, but she's a really good D. I wish she was. She's the one that played Div 3 and came back and that kind of stuff. But anyway, I'd go with Leonard tonight. That's my 2 cents.
Well, Tom, I would also counsel you to stay on her if she's going through a really tough time right now, because knowing that there's other people out there that care probably makes a big difference.
Yeah,
Especially if she is.
I keep inviting her and asking her how she's doing and all this kind of stuff. So I think it's got a lot to do with how much the tribe or the whatever it is gives her, the counselor, because they a lot of times they'll pay the tuition for them, but sometimes they don't. So it all depends what the band, I guess. It all depends what the band decides at their council meetings. So
Hey,
who knows?
I just thought of something, Sammy and Kim. Were you guys watching the game last night? Did you see the little Islander flashback pack they had on between periods of Chico Resch, 1975?
I used to love him.
They had like a 1-minute pack. It was when they were down 3-0 and they came back to win the next 4 games in 1975. There were two things. I mean, number one, Resch looked like a toothpick in the net with his pads in his pants and everything. That was one thing. But they were showing them shaking hands at the end of the game. Guess who went by in the line shaking Chico Resch's hand? A guy named Apps. They were playing Pittsburgh. I noticed it was kind of funny. Anyway, so we have to pass that one on to Appsy. But the other thing that came up when Tom was commenting there was the whole Leonard Caulfield thing. And I thought it was kind of interesting. And I think everybody's aware that Leonard was basically boasting after the game that the intel that they had on Caulfield was that he either shoots high or goes 5-hole and on breakaways. And so they had him figured out, and that's why he stopped him. Like, to say something like that, like they were saying on Hockey Night last night, to say something like that in the middle of a series when you're not done with a team, like, what are you thinking? And I don't know if it points to the egos involved in the game now, but I was shocked that Leonard would sort of say something like that, be cocky enough to say something like that. And then Caulfield, of course, had the final word in Game 6, scoring on neither of those locations. So that was kind of an interesting thing, too. Matt, go ahead. And then,
sorry, Kim, did you have something first, or?
Oh, sorry, Kim. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to change the subject slightly, still in goalie world, but not on the NHL guys.
Yeah, I was just going to see what the opinions are, like in terms of the strategy that Vegas has taken with the 1A, 1B, right? I mean, we talked about it briefly about some programs and teams have a clear number one and a backup, basically in the event of an injury, but whereas other teams will go for that 1A, 1B. And I'm just wondering what you guys think about that strategy. And, there's pros and cons, I guess, to it, but it's obviously creating sort of this situation in Vegas. So would you rather have that versus them having to put in a career backup at this point, or if there's an injury?
I can't comment because it is what it is. You know what I'm saying? We're talking hypothetically here. You're dealt the cards you've got. You've got two number one goalies. I didn't know that you had that until Leonard played his game. And says, I don't know who put up two number ones as the way to go. Because you create
That was me.
a delineation. Can you comment on that, Sammy?
I just think that you need to go with your best players. So you get the best you can possibly get. And you don't know about injury. You don't know about what could happen. But you as a coach, it is then your job to, walk them through this process and how this is going to work. And I hated it, to be honest, as a goalie. I didn't like it because I wanted to play all the time. But I had coaches, specifically Ken Duffton, who he himself was a goalie, and it was fair. We went back and forth, and obviously sometimes in playoffs things were different, but it's not the way I would have chosen it to be, but it's what made our team successful. So goalies will not like it, but you as a coach, I think you can manage those expectations, manage the emotions of that. And I think it is the best for your team to have the best players possible. That's my opinion. And that includes goalies.
Matt, I think your point is well taken because I'm a two number one head coach. I don't treat goalies differently. And I did the same in Sammy's day. I didn't think anybody was any better than anybody else to that degree. The decision makers had a 1A, 1B philosophy. I maintained my philosophy and shared my opinions accordingly. When I coached the Oval team, I had two very good goalies, one that won a national championship, and the following year, playing in the national final, I started the other goalie. We won. And the original goalie was used to 1A, 1B. So you have a philosophy. And Matt, I don't know if you recall when I was out there mentoring you many years ago, you had a conundrum with your goalies because you had a number one goalie that was, I think, struggling, and the other one was hot. So that was the debate that we went through, and you had put yourself in that position because you had created this better than the other status. And no problem with it. That's the way you coach. That's the way you're going to coach. You can have success with it. It's just that, understand the difficulty of that when somebody, and I think that's what's happened here. Is Fleury a 1B goalie now and Leonard a 1A? I don't really care. It's a Stanley Cup and it's 1 or 2 games, 1 game. So that's the art of coaching. That's the beauty of these conversations. Really enjoy it. Thanks very much. 1A, 1B, we mean what, Tim?
I just wanted to clarify, it sounds by some of the things you're saying there, Wally, when I say I've got a 1A and 1B means I don't have a number 2. I have 2 number 1s. You seem to be saying if somebody is 1B that they're somehow sort of number 2 or lesser than 1A. For me, 1A and 1B means you got 2 number 1s and not a number 1 and a number 2. So I just wanted to clarify that. I'm not sure what everybody else's view is.
Yep. I would
Yeah,
say 2 1s.
Yeah, and yeah, sorry for the confusion by bringing up the question in the first place. That's what I was referring to, Tim, as well. Was as I'm recruiting, for example, do I try to get 2 number 1s and follow the philosophy that Sammy was talking about, or do I try to bring in someone right from the get-go who's going to be a clear number 1 and a clear number 2? And Wally hit the nail on the head a couple of years ago. We had that scenario, and it led to some difficult choices, right? So I mean, there's pros and cons, I suppose, to each, and at the end of the day, I agree with Sammy's point that you try to bring in the best players that you can, and if you bring in someone who starts as a number 2, you try to develop her to a number 1 and go from there.
I mean, I also think you're probably a good enough coach to be able to handle it, whatever you end up getting, right? And not all coaches will be able to handle it, but the Montreal team that we played against all the time, they only had a number 1. So when Kim was there, she was the number 1. She played all the games. When Charlie was there, she was the number 1. She played all the games. And, I don't know, did that ruin my development because I played only half the games and she played all the games? They were playing all the games. So then when you get to the next level, does that mean you just have less time in the net? I don't know. Does it make me a better teammate in the end? Yes, certainly, but I think that in my opinion, you go after the best you can get. You're not always going to get that, right? So don't hinder yourself. I think especially in youth sports, just try to get the best you can. And if you, by luck, get 2 amazing goalies at one time, well, that's just lucky. But for the most part, it probably won't end up that way, right?
It's kind of interesting. I was just thinking, I'm not sure if off the top of my head, and if we're talking NHL, if there's another NHL team that we might consider has 2 number 1s, or 1A and 1B, whatever way. Like Vegas did it on purpose, for whatever reason. Whether it's they couldn't get rid of Fleury's contract or they just felt like it was the way to go. But it is an interesting philosophical discussion, because in lots of ways, the simple way to look at it, like for me, your goalie is the most important player. Like Dave King, I think it was Dave, he first said to me, yes, take those accolades, Sammy. They definitely are the most important. I first heard Dave say it, goaltending is 90% of your game when you have it and 100% when you don't. So are you doing yourself a disservice? And if this is true, maybe a lot of NHL teams are you doing yourself and your team a disservice if you don't have 2 number 1 goalies? Because of course, players all struggle. So when your number 1 who's playing starts to struggle, you've got a number 1 who can go in and fill in for them. Injuries happen. So in lots of ways, the simple way to look at it is you should get the 2 best goalies you can find. And or can they not afford to have two, Sammy? I get what you're saying. Like Vegas spends about 9.5 or 10 million, I think, on their two goalies. Montreal spends 10 million on Carey Price. Both have worked out to some extent. But again, if goaltending is your most important position, why would you not overspend in that position?
I think
And
you're right, Tim, but I think the guys are leaving too because they
sorry?
want the goalie themselves are leaving. If they're putting into that situation, I think a lot of goalies would not want to be there. So then they are asking their agent to put them in a situation where they are the number one.
Yeah.
So I think because there's, 30 clubs, that's 30 number ones. Now you need 60 number ones. There's probably not that much talent to go around. So they know they could just move to a different club and play full time. So it takes a certain kind of athlete, also Leonard and Fleury, to stay there, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And that's a large part of the puzzle for sure. Mm-hmm. And it would be interesting even to know, I guess Leonard was on a bit of a rehab, so maybe he got into it, not fully by choice, but he grabbed at the opportunity. But it is an interesting question to debate, and that's a large part of it is, can you convince two goalies to share the load? And, as much as we all like to play, I think at that level, winning is really the ultimate. Or maybe it isn't, because players chase money more than they chase winning to a large degree, which is very disappointing.
Or I think goalies chase playing.
Mm-hmm.
I think
but that's part of
winning, in my opinion.
But that's part of what I'm saying. You have a better chance to win, you being the only one, the only egg in the basket, or are you increasing your chances of winning if, let's say, Varlamov said, hey, I'm going to go and split time with Carey Price next year because he's going to be better and I'm going to be better, and we got a way better chance to win if we do that. So there's a lot to it. I think Dom was up next. Go ahead, Dom.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting discussion and one that, kind of similar, dynamic in regards to what happened in Calgary with David Rittich, made the All-Star team, right? And then it was him and Talbot signed with the intent that, hey, I'm going to get a chance to get a lot of minutes here and everything else. And then they signed Markstrom to, whatever they signed with $6 million a year. So then Markstrom's playing the majority of games, and Ridge's upset that he's not playing. And then when he does get his opportunity, isn't ready for whatever reason. I think that cannot be underlooked in regards to, and again, it is so difficult. I guess, Sammy, you would, obviously this firsthand, but I see it a lot where if the guy thinks that he's not going to play and he's just the backup or doesn't have the mindset that he has to be ready every game that he's going in, then when he does ultimately get his chance, he's not ready to play. It happened with Rittich in the playoffs against who were they playing in the playoff? Dallas, right? Talbot was playing, they were going with him, and then they needed him to step up. And you could just tell when he went in, he just wasn't ready to play. And they ended up scoring, and I think it was 3-1, I think, and then he went in and ended up being 6-1 and at the end. But to me, the biggest part is the player's mentality, and regardless of who's the one and who isn't, it's being able to have that second guy be ready to go in. When I was in Buffalo with Dominic Hasek and Dwayne Rollison was just a good guy, right? He was going in, like Dom played, I don't know, 82 games. He probably played 70 of them. He knew that there wasn't much expectation, but at the same time, he was a fraction of the goalie of what he could be. I met him a couple years later when he had moved to Minnesota, and he had actually gone down to the minors and then come back up. His mindset was totally different, and he was like a different guy, a different player. Like he had gone from, I'm just happy to be here, I'm in the NHL, I'm Dom's backup, came down to the minors. He was just okay when he came down with us. And then he was like, you know what, I want to play. So got in the mindset, split the net with him and Manny Fernandez in Minnesota, and then basically got himself back to the point where being a number one. But that's the thing, guys. You know, I get it. You're going to sign. There's going to be the instances where you sign the sixth guy for $6 million. Yeah, sure. He's supposed to be the number one, but you need the number two to be pushing. Even though Riddick was making 2.2 or whatever he was making, you have to have the mindset that you're going in. You're playing. You might play 10 games over the year, but if you want your team to be successful, you have to have the mindset that every single game you might go in, and that's the hardest job. And that's, you know what, it's no different from being a player. I was a player. I sat 21 games straight in Edmonton. I was a healthy scratch, 21 games straight. But I had the mindset that every game I was going to play, and I lived every single game. It was the hardest year mentally for me because every game that I played, it was like I was playing. I had pregame nap. I slept. But I wasn't playing. But when I got in, I was ready. I had 5 points in 7 games in the NHL when I came back because it was just your mindset. So a lot of it is the ego as well, right? Like the player's ego is, and that was the same thing with Ritter. Ritter's a great guy, but it was like, well, I want to get traded and I want to get out of here. Well, then when they finally granted his wish and he went and got traded, he was like, oh, well, you know, he didn't want to leave Calgary, right? Ended up going to Toronto, and like he just got thrown right into the cauldron there. But as I say, that to me is the most important thing, regardless of who's the one and who's not. Like if you're going to win, you're going to need two. You're going to need two, because if you have a stud Carey Price and someone hammers Carey Price, Jake Allen or whoever the backup is, he better be ready, because all of a sudden it goes down to a game 7 and whatever else have you, and now you come in and you're like, well, I didn't think I was going to play, right? Like that to me is the most important. Thomas Greiss last year with the Islanders was a prime example, right? He came in and was an absolute stud and ended up winning games for the Islanders last year to be able to come in. To me, I remember thinking to myself, if the Flames would have had that, they might have moved on. And if you don't have that, you know, as that tandem as a goalie, regardless of who's getting paid more and whatever else have you, I don't think you have any chance of going on, because it's more than one, right? Like the Flames had 4 guys on their roster last year. They had Markstrom, Ritter, and then they had Zagadulin, or they had Domingue just waiting in the wings, right? And I think moving forward, you're going to need 3, because I think the game is so fast. Like you're one net drive away from being knocked out. So sorry guys, I'm jumping all over the map all over again. But
listen, I got my hand up because as you're talking, Tim and I have exchanged on this, and it has to do with goaltending and goalie coaches. Carey Price was struggling, and during the season, I noticed he was, because the team wasn't succeeding as well in front of him. And I had made contact with a friend, Paul Henry, who's going to join us possibly next week. Paul is probably the most experienced hockey scout, recruiter, expert in his recognition of talent, and really looks after the associations, the teams, NHL, Western Hockey League, that have hired him for their services. So he mentioned that he worked with Dave King and myself. He basically picked the teams that went to Spangler Cups when Dave was coaching. And he picked the 94 national team, identified the players that got invited to the national team camps and were selected. So the 88 Olympic team, and especially the one that lost in that shootout to Corey Hurst, to the Swedish player, those were Paul's identified players. And he said to me, I talked to him recently about a young player in Denmark who is a goalie that is draftable, and I called Dan Church about him. But in the conversation, he said, "You know where Berkey is?" No, I don't. Where is he? I thought he was the goalie coach in Toronto, but he says, no, Montreal, Ducharme brought him in to work with Price. And if that was the case, I'm looking at how Price has gotten back to his best game. That's a case where a goalie coach, in my mind, he may have helped. I'm assuming behind the seats he may have helped. But the thing Paul alerted to me, he knows the coaches, the staffs, the managers of every NHL team. And he said that Ducharme and Montreal, they align with his philosophy of coaching, which is empowering people and not making decisions outside of the box that catch you off guard. And this is the case where he's on the bench with a head coach who's replaced the coach with COVID. And that's one story. And the other one is Vasilevsky. Now, this isn't a 1A. This is a number 1 and maybe a number 3B backup. Because I know the backup is his body may not get him through a game. Some of the injuries that he's acquired over time have affected his joints. And Vasilevsky isn't going to come out. It's an easy decision to keep Vasilevsky in that organization's case. They're not looking at, the way he played last night to me. And Sammy, my question is, I felt Vasilevsky got exposed in the upper corner on the glove side. I've never seen that before. I never could identify a weakness, period. But this appears to be, we've got something here. And it may be inside his head. I don't know. But I just wanted to share that, Sammy. What's your thoughts on the Vasilevsky thing and the Price thing?
So I think, Wally, we will never know what's inside the goalies' heads, right? So what gets in their head, what doesn't get in their head. They've probably got to this level because they have the ability to park the last game. I think no matter what happens, these guys are pros and they'll find their motivation for that next game or when they get in. So he'll watch the game tape. He'll see, that he was exposed there. And he really isn't normally. So I'm sure that there'll be, it simply takes one session with a goalie coach to get yourself kind of back into your regular feel. But they're there for a reason. I think they have the ability to come back from that. And sometimes when you feel like, I know that, if I was exposed by one team in a certain area, I think in my head, now they think they can score there. So now I've got them, so you kind of turn it back on them. And you think the opposite, like now they're going to think that that's where they're going to score. And I'm going to take that away every time, So there's ways that you can manipulate any data processed as a goaltender that you have to do to be able to go into the next game in a good state of mind.
What about Price's play, Sammy? Any thoughts on his play?
Just his overall play, I think, has been very steady and confident. The one thing that I have noticed more is his lateral movement that perhaps a little further out makes him have to move further. Normally he's just going from low post to post, but he's further out playing and laterally stretching. We haven't really seen him in those positions before this year. So I think that's something he's really worked on and is a skill at an older age is so amazing that he has really mastered the RVH, that lean into the post, but also isn't reliant on it like some of the other goalies. So he has his foot on the outside of the post, which means that he is able to do an overlapper for those non-goalies, basically be able to be in a butterfly position and make a save, but still he's always cognizant of where that next play is going to happen, where he needs to go 2 or 3 plays from there. So he's a marvel to watch. And it has been a pleasure to be able to watch him this far into the playoffs. But Wally, I don't know if you saw my comment about the backup. So I think that, as a backup and a starter, you do warm up differently. You're going to play differently. Like, you're going to prepare differently, or you'll go a little bit crazy. I think if you tried to pretend as if for 80 games you were actually going to be playing. But I think the backup, when you're told that, it is your responsibility to then be there for your teammates in a different way than if you were the starter. So, the starter can be off on her own a little bit more, or his own a little bit more. But I think the backup has a responsibility of almost a coach in that dressing room, that I think that maybe lots of coaches don't utilize with their backup goalie, and really bring them into the process that way and give them some roles and responsibilities that could be helpful for the mental well-being of that backup goalie, and getting them to buy in and to feel valued in the process as well.
Good. Tim?
I was just, I was myself kind of chuckling last night when, Kelly and I don't know whether Cassie, I guess all of them were talking about how they found a weakness in Vasilevsky because he happened to have a couple of goals scored against them, high glove. I mean, look at the replay of that 2-2 goal. That shot will never happen again in this millennium. Like, Vasilevsky was in perfect position, save for maybe his glove should have been 2 inches higher. Like, and especially consider the source as well. I mean, if it was Barzell or somebody, maybe you think he'd do it again before the end of the millennium. But so that was my one thought. I was kind of chuckling at that. And I'm not sure that anybody would even think of taking him out of the net anyway. He's such a stud. He's played so well so long. He's won the cup. I mean, he is clearly number one, no matter the state of the backup goalie. I don't think he would have come out. And for me, right now, and I'm sure people would disagree, Carey Price is hands down Conn Smythe Trophy winner right now. Montreal likely would have been out the first round if it were not for him.
You're
and
true.
Could have been out in the second round. And even in a timely fashion, man, even in that game 6, like, he had to make a 5-alarmer at the end of the second period. It could have been 3-1. And then a 5-alarm and a 4-alarm early in the third. It could have been 3-2. Like, he's been everything for them. They played extremely well, positionally, defensively, gotten timely scoring, killed penalties. But if you're picking a Conn Smythe winner right now, I don't know how you look past him. You could make other arguments, I suppose, but he'd be in the mix.
Sammy, I got a point on Vasilevsky and that top shot, those goals. What his glove? I looked at his glove positioning, and his glove seemed to be turned down when that puck went in. Are goalies on that kind of a situation thinking shoulders got the top corner? And
Yeah, so that's called a chicken wing, where you do this instead of this.
Yeah, like his glove was up at his shoulder height, turned inward.
Like this, right?
And back in the day, you might have done the lift the arm up. And between the eras of goaltenders we grew up in and what he's doing there, he's given that space. And I find that space can be exploited with Fleury. It's been exploited with Fleury pretty consistently. They're shooting high all the time. And is it a habit with some goalies? And I've never seen a bad habit with Vasilevsky until.
It's interesting, Wally, because we had a presentation from a skill. So the neat thing about this goalie symposium is last year's people that did the clinic had to present this year, and also people from the skills clinic had to present. So we had this skills coach for the St. Louis Blues come and talk from a shooter's perspective. What is the latest with the shooters? And so he was talking a lot about stick positioning and, looking at the goalie's RVH and how, it's a constant cat and mouse game of how do we as shooters get in front of what the goalies are doing, and how do the goalies, and so right now the goalie is taking away the whole bottom of the ice. So how does the shooter respond? There's more up top. So that's there. So then, what we were thinking from a goalie's perspective of what we see next year in goaltending and how does it evolve, like where is the evolution? And so part of that will be that, Wally, is how do you, goalies often get stuck in between this position, like this is the chicken wing and this is the, save. Or in an RVH, the players are shooting by the ears. So how do you get your hand closer to that? And so how do you teach those? And so that was the constant discussion. So it was really interesting to hear from a shooter's perspective, what is open, what they're teaching their shooters to shoot at, and then how as goalies do you morph and change. And so it was fascinating. But you're right, Wally, things are going higher right now because the goalies are all so strong down low.
Yeah, I think I've been saying for 3 years, goalies go down too soon because those spaces are been open.
Yeah,
open,
the way of teaching goaltending now is a lot more of standing on your feet than it was 2 years ago. So that has changed and is trying to get back into the game too. It's funny how everything with constant changing. But you're right.
It's cat and mouse, like you said, and that's where it's at. Very good. Yeah. Did you pick up anything else at the clinic that you can share with us? Because I'd written that down last week when I knew you wouldn't be here to make sure you.
Yeah, it was fascinating to part of goalie coaching that I didn't really think about sort of the hierarchical stages of goaltending and how it is so individual, right? You're coaching an individual. And how do you make it to the NHL? So that was, there is myself, and then there's the 3 Calgary PW based pro girls there. So Cassidy Sauvé, Kristen Campbell, who just made the Olympic team, and then Marlene Boissever, something like that, I think, Tim. So the 3 goalies on the Calgary team currently, and who knows if they had to do it or what, but so all men, with 30 of them, and aspiring to OHL, WHL, and then NHL. But the NHL coaches, the way they all got there was who they knew or who they worked with. So you work with a young goalie, you develop this sort of stable, and then one gets to that next level, and then they bring their goalie coach to that junior team or whatever, and then it's you work with another goalie who then brings you over here, and it is so much more. It's such a different process as a coach than it is when you're coaching teams and you're applying for these positions. They were saying that there is rarely applications when it comes to goalie coaching. That it is the goalies that are getting these coaches at the level. So I found that really interesting as a process.
I've thought of that with assistant coaches becoming head coaches because they've coached in the American League, and the players that have moved up to the senior team are familiar with them, some of them. Mm-hmm. And so I look at the Flames naming of an assistant coach, and they brought in the gentleman from Montreal as well as the head coach from Stockton from last year. So that familiarity with the coach, because head coaches don't have the same expertise or competence of teaching that position. And the familiar with young players coming up, if you've been in the organization and been with the American League team, there's a degree of familiarity in communication. So I'm glad you brought that point up. It's really a good one.
Goalies. I mean, if you wanted to get into the minutia of goaltending, I could talk for hours. I mean, we did, a 2-hour presentation discussion on just simply screening the goalie. How does a goalie look around a screen? And that's 2 hours, so everything was just broken down into such minutia of detail, which as a goalie fan, it was really great. But also something that, I think the goaltending levels 1 and 2 would be really rewarding for any coach to take, just to get an idea of, what the goalies are doing, what the positioning is, what's the latest, those kind of things. They don't necessarily have to take this whole 3-day certification course, but definitely recommend it.
What do you
But
think?
I did tell you, Wally, that fun was not really brought into it until day 2. So it was definitely a Hockey Canada driven, mentality behind it all. So that was a little disconcerting to be part of all over again. But
No, what do you mean by not being brought in till day 2? I didn't hear that.
just that there was, when we're talking about drills, we're talking about how to coach, how to do all these things. And we had that discussion the entire first day, but never once was it talked about the well-being of the athlete or how much fun they're having until the second day. So anyways, you take that with a grain of salt. But I did put in the chat that I sat on a panel with Devin Levi and whoever the other world junior goalie is, whose name escapes me right now. But they were really great guys and talked about how much fun they had and all the other sports they played and why they loved goaltending, was the fun that they had doing it. And so I think that opened a lot of the coaches' eyes up to what was important. And even at the world junior level, what's important. And Roberto Luongo gave a presentation as well, speaking from a goalie's perspective, but also from a general manager and perspective. And that he really felt like goaltending was missing fun in the game because it is so sport specific and you are dealing with the minutia of details all the time. And even Hockey Canada's drill bank doesn't have any fun goalie drills. It just has goalie drills, but not like competitive goalie drills or goalie drills where you just get to throw a beach ball in the air and try to keep it up and things like that can make goaltending really fun.
They're getting to be very skilled targets.
Right. And so, but the biggest thing for a lot of these coaches is they are minor hockey coaches. So they, how do you keep goalies in the game? How do you want them to want to be that position? How do you make it so that it is intriguing? Some people are going to be naturally drawn to it, but others, they have to see that I can still have fun back there away from my teammates. So.
One question I've got, Sami, about goalies and minor hockey. How soon do you start working with a goalie specialist as you're a parent with your young kid? When are you seeking them out? And then once they start playing, what role does that specialist have in terms of helping the goalie and the head coach of the team with the team philosophy?
Yeah, so I think those are big questions, and we certainly delved into a lot of that. Emryn Smashmeyer was on a panel, and she had a goalie coach before she even had a team. So she grew up in a hockey mad family, and she was doing skills and doing that stuff beforehand, before she even started playing hockey. But Devin Levi and the other guy didn't have goalie coaches till they were probably 9 or 10, I think was the age group. So me now working with goalies and running a goalie camp, I would say that I would recommend it to, specialize with a goalie coach throughout the year, maybe when they are about 10 or 11. But that prior to that, going to goalie camps can be quite fun for the goalies because they get to meet other kids like them. So less about the skill development and more about them just having this community of goaltending. Now that's just, my personal view of what I've seen at the goalie camps and one-on-one that I've done. But I think then the goalie coach, we talked about, the responsibilities of the goalie coach, and it is wide ranging. Some of these guys are coming from full for-profit goalie organizations, and they're not working with the team. The kid is just coming to them. So they're doing an hour session. Others are on teams, at higher levels, junior levels, and are right there with the coaches. But the one thing that all the coaches were saying is that, worked at the highest level, is that when you're working with a team, you are an assistant coach who specializes in goaltending. You are not the goalie coach. So just like Tim Bothwell, assistant coach, specializes in defense. that, you still need to know as a goalie coach, you need to know the systems. You need to really invest time to know the shooters, to know the players, to be able to provide feedback. And that's how these goalie coaches feel like they've stuck around teams, as they've really put themselves into that position to know the whole game and to be able to provide feedback in that way.
Are they involved in the philosophy of 1A, 1B, and what does the head coach think, and how do they approach things?
So it just depends on the ability for the head coach to integrate. Sometimes, it could be an old school mentality, their way or the highway. And while other coaches would have provided a great experience. So, I think that it goes from, spectrum A to spectrum B and everywhere in between. But I think ideally the way the best staffs work, and I've been getting this through my podcast as well, is it seems to be the way the best staffs work are the ones that, hear all the voices and everybody feels like they're able to contribute. And then ultimately one person at the top is making the final decision.
I was just looking on, following up on the whole 1A, 1B, Carey Price, Vasilette, the whole, from a stats perspective. And I kind of had forgotten this, that, Price was hurt quite a bit this year. And he didn't play particularly well, but he only played 25 games this year. And, his save percentage was 27th in the league this year.
Yeah, I did the International Women's Day game on TSN. So I was the analyst at that game, and if you remember the controversy, they had just fired the goalie coach during the game. Do you remember that with the Montreal Canadiens? After the second period, they fired him. And then Marco Marciani, who worked with us, Tim, was brought in because Sean Burke had to quarantine. So Sean Burke was in the States, and that was who the goalie coach was going to be, but he couldn't work with him. So Marco was working with him when I was doing this game. So that was really intriguing because they were talking about Price going back to the basics. He had struggled up until that point. He had lots of injuries, but really from that time. So when International Women's Day is like mid-February, kind of, that's kind of when he seemed to come back. And so then starting to work with Sean Burke as well. But this other goalie coach had been there and was very well respected in the industry, been there for like 6-7 years, like a while. He had worked with Carey, and Carey didn't know they were firing him. Like they didn't have that conversation with him. So I found that interesting too, yeah. Anyways, it was the 2 days after they had fired their head coach, they fired the goalie coach. And so either Dominique Ducharme or maybe just getting somebody like Sean Burke, a veteran, in there to have some conversations with Carey to kind of get him back to the basics. And who knows, the injuries could have plagued some of the other games he played as well. And we don't know, he doesn't say much in media scrums. So. Yeah,
it's just really interesting that I hadn't really in front of my mind thought, you know what, he only played half a year this year. And so, like, he's an older guy. And so is all of that rest, as they've often talked about goalies as well, is it better to get some rest so you can push through the marathon that is the playoffs? And I
mean, I certainly think so, but I don't know what his injuries were. So I wonder if there was even any rest. Like when you're injured, you're working so hard to rehab. He wasn't playing in the games.
So a lot of mental rest.
Yes, for sure.
Or mental stress on the other way, not playing.
Who knows? Like he could have been so torn up about playing poorly, or these injuries could have been plaguing him. Like, who knows? But you're right. I mean, I think rest going into that time frame would have been can only serve him well now going deep into the playoffs.
Yeah, and so part of my thought was, in some ways, they did have a 1A and a 1B this year in a different way. They had goalies totally split time, but not for the classic, 1A, 1B reason where they just sharing the load. And the other thing, then when you look at that, like Allen, but his save percentage was about the same. Like Montreal did not get good goaltending all year long.
Well, Jake Allen at that time was playing a lot better. So it's controversial at that for the game I did that Price came in. And when you talk about teams actually that had 1A and 1B, I did it against Vancouver. So they had Thatcher Demko and who's the other proven goalie? The other guy was supposed to be the number one, and Thatcher Demko's this tall goalie came in and got the majority of the games this year for Vancouver.
Miller's
played
there,
big.
I think, right? Miller?
Who was it?
I think it's Miller, isn't it? On his way out in Vancouver.
No,
Miller?
not Miller. They replaced Miller with somebody. Somebody that's been around the league. I'm gonna look it up because this is gonna bug me.
So anyway, like, but Allen, his numbers are not very good this year either. So Montreal were kind of in the weeds all year. They're probably a better team than a lot of people gave them credit for because they really weren't getting the goaltending that they needed. Like all the best teams, they've got, and you know, partly because they're better teams, but you know, if you don't have a save percentage over 915, you're getting into shaky territory, and they're way below that, both of them all year. And they're way above that, or he is way above that in the playoffs. So
The goalie they had was Braden Holtby. So they traded Jacob Markstrom away for Braden Holtby.
Yeah.
Anyways.
And on that point, like everybody thinks Markstrom was so friggin' great here in Calgary, but his save percentage was way below what it needs to be. Maybe partly because of the quality chances they gave up, but like I mentioned before, like I was shocked to see his save percentage in over half of his games. Like he played like, I think Markstrom played like 33 games this year. In 18 of his games, his save percentage was like 88 or something like that. Like that's
they were
like,
saying,
well,
though, that the way that the NHL coaches are coaching now is for quality versus quantity. So that the save percentage for goalies is becoming a little bit of a misnomer. So you can't just simply say you're going to get 40 shots on net and then some will go in if you're not getting the quality shots. So, I mean, I know with stats and everything, there is quality shots versus not quality shots. And so Calgary, I think, was giving up quality shots all the time, you know, so it's tough to have a good save percentage if all the shots are coming from, you know, that sort of home plate right in front of you.
Yeah. Tom's got his hand up, but that raises another very interesting question around the whole stats thing is they need to revamp their whole stats in the NHL. They're so old school. On that point exactly, sort of take the dangerous shots and make a separate stat with them versus the overall shot stat. But go ahead, Tom, you had your hand up, so.
You're still on mute, Tom.
Your mic off, Tom.
With Markstrom, he was fantastic at the start of the year. Then he raced for that puck against Vancouver and had that collision with the player. He was out, but he had a concussion. And when he came back, he didn't look like the same goalie. He was letting out rebounds all the time and everything. And then at the end, he got it back and he was really good again. So I think that's reflected in his save percentages that he was great, terrible, great. You know, so that's what I saw.
Did he, Tim, do you know the save percentages? Like the breakdown of them from the year?
What do you mean?
Well, he said he was great. Then he was injured and he didn't really recover. Was his percentage better at the beginning of the year?
Well, it's hard to get those numbers, but like I said, he, you know, in more than half of his starts, his save percentage was seriously in the death zone. And part of that for sure is maybe the quality chances they gave up, the number of and the absolute quality of them. I don't know, because they don't really freely track, well, they track them, but they don't share those stats. They need to redo their whole stats thing in the NHL.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah. Now I wanted to go back to Price, but more importantly, back to the Montreal Canadiens and what they've gone through this year in terms of where they are right now. When the season started, I was highlighting, videoing, copying their clips because they were the best performing team in the league from the get-go in my mind. And I really was impressed with their 200-foot play, the defensive zone play, but just a complete team. And then, like a roller coaster, for whatever reason, things go down. They fire the coaching staff, and then they bring in a new coach. And so what they've gone through all year is really amazing. But I'm seeing the similar team now. And I mentioned on a text, Sammy, after the last game they won, and I've watched the last 2 games they've won, I watched the post-game interviews. And the post-game interviews with Luke Richardson are something every coach should listen to. This guy gets it with his gut and his brain. He's the most articulate, bang on, saying the things that are being said that would know why the team is what it is and where it is, the appreciation of what they've got.
I liked Wally. So doing the game in mid-February, you as media get to be behind the scenes and you get all the media packs. And Dominic Ducharme had just come in, so we got to see all his interviews and interview him. And I was super impressed with him coming in, with his language of team play. And, you know, they were asking him about players and he wasn't sort of jumping the gun on anybody. It was, you know, we're going to play everybody. And really the game that I did would have been his first full game. I guess maybe a second game, but regardless, they played 4 lines. I mean, they really rolled through the lines and they allowed everybody. To me, he seemed to value the roles and to value each guy. And I don't know. I don't know him from anything, but you know, Luke Richardson is somebody I think within the hockey world that is so well respected. And for Dominic Ducharme and him, for that kind of pairing to be together, I'm sure that they have sort of the same kind of philosophy and mentality. So, you know, it's the guys when they're doing their media interviews now are talking about team first and, you know, playing for the guys back home, or even, was it Montreal that was playing for the guys upstairs too, that were sitting out?
Yep.
It was them, right? So they would score and then they would look up to the rafters for the guys that weren't playing, to include them in the celebrations and stuff. And I don't know, I feel like I like their, you know, it's always nice when the nice team is winning, and they seem like they have the right thought process and the right, I don't know, they're playing beyond their skill level to me. They're playing as a team.
Well, what's happened is we began this session talking about the conundrum in minor hockey, prep teams going there, looking for something better, and the shortening of the bench, which really is the root of the way they're coached. And at this level, when you mention rolling of the lines, during the interview, one of the interviews, Luke Richardson was asked about why he started a line in the 3rd period. It might have been the 4th line he started. His answer is exactly what you're talking about. They're good enough. They're playing well. And if the players believe that, and you may think, like I don't think they have talent. They've got talented players, but nobody is putting himself above another player.
Mm-hmm.
And the role you earn and learn and begin to accept and play determines how you're going to play. And I think that's why, talking to Paul Henry, Tim, you know, he has inside stories on Ducharme over many years. And he talked about the culture and the positive nature of the culture there. And I think that's really a huge part of the result, that they can play 4 lines this way And it's also pretty good to have Carey Price in the nets to
Yeah,
allow
you have
them to
you
go
have a
as far as they
superstar
have.
stud in net.
Yeah.
Well, I just put in the chat that I have to go and get my daughter onto her online class. She's
Well-
running wild outside right now. I don't know what she's doing.
That's
Well,
what
Sammy-
she's supposed to do. She's 5.
Exactly. Yeah, you're supposed to run wild. I heard from a neighbor the other day that he scolded her for walking along the top of the fence. I was like,
Oh.
yes, you can scold her for that. So that's fine.
You must also applaud her for that too, though.
Yes, I mean, quite the balance. I mean,
Yeah.
amazing. But yes,
That's
both you
great.
guys tune into Sledge Hockey tomorrow. Watch
Yeah.
the guys at 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
Now, did they
Amen.
beat the U.S. in a game?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so the round robin game, it was the first time they've beaten the US in a meaningful game since 2017. But the tough thing is that they're going to play Russia in the semis. And Russia is the silver medalist from Sochi, but then got banned, right? So they came into this tournament unseeded. So they had a 4-team top pool, 4-team bottom two pool, and Russia won the bottom. So then Canada gets us by to the semi, and now we'll play Russia,
Oh, yeah.
which is fine. You got to get through everybody to win. However, the same thing happened to them in Sochi, where they, because they beat the, I think because the Americans lost in the round robin, it ended up as this crossover versus Canada, and Canada got bumped out. So, I mean, all you can do is try to win all the games you win. But had they lost to the Americans, they would have been playing Korea, who they beat 7-0. So this will be a test for sure tomorrow. And the guys don't really know what to expect of Russia. Also, they haven't seen them in such a long time. So it'll be interesting. That's for sure.
Yeah. And do we know if it's televised or not, or probably watch it on the internet, I
So,
guess.
yeah, it's live streamed, and if you just go to the Hockey Canada website, they have it right when you click on. So it's at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning, my time. So 9 o'clock you guys' time. And then the gold medal potentially would be on Saturday at I think it's mid-afternoon.
Yeah. Well, you need to go. I'm still kicking myself for not. I'm sure that was Billy. I passed in the Amsterdam airport.
Oh, I'm
I-
sure he was one of the guys, for
I
sure.
was trying in my brain to think, well, wait a minute. I just saw them all on the plane.
I'm
how did you-
surprised that Ken Babby would not have mentioned it, knowing your background in women's hockey.
Well, no, we talked about Billy and he
okay.
yeah. But I didn't put the 2 and 2 together that they were on separate flights.
Oh,
And then
gotcha.
I got off the plane really fast and I'm thinking, how did those guys get there ahead of me? And
Right.
they're dressed differently and there's 3 of them. And then I thought, well, maybe they're, sports psych staff or somebody coming to join the team. Or
Right.
I
Yeah.
didn't think about everybody not being in Calgary, but I
well.
should have gone over and said hello anyway, but
Next time you're on a flight. That happened to me with Matt Holberg, who is on this call. I sat beside him for 5 hours on a flight. And neither one of us knew who each other were until the
Oh.
last 5 minutes. Yeah.
That's
Randomly too.
funny.
Not even going to the same event or same thing or anything. But I met him on an airplane. And only in the last 5 minutes when I finally saw I think I saw his binder or something that said Queens Women's Hockey. Are you involved in women's hockey? Yeah. So funny.
Are
So-
you? Yes.
Yeah. Are you? Yeah. Anyways.
Too
Okay,
funny.
well, this has been just a pleasure. I'm glad I could be one of the last ones finally. Normally I'm
Yep.
bumped off before then.
And I so wish that Ernst would have been on this morning too, like our goalie coach, because it would have been interesting to hear his.
I would
his-
love to talk goalies with him anytime. That'd be fun.
He's good man. Anyway, I got to run too, Wally. So
Okay.
Okay,
Take
me
care,
too.
guys.
It's been a great session, everybody. I've got 8 pages of notes. I'm going to keep busy for 2 or 3 days and sending out stuff, which I hope some people will look at. But thanks very much for being on, both of
okay,
you.
take care, Wally.
Bye-bye.